So hello again. Here is Michael Leander. We are ready to start the webinar, and I see that many of you have already used the chat box. Please use the chat box to let us know if there are things you do not understand, if we speak too quick, or if there are any issues at all with regards to sound or anything else. So the program today is that I will start giving you some ideas to get your digital thought processes moving. So my job really is to share with you just a few best practices without going into any particular detail. After me, you will get a short message from Mr. Maleki, who is one of the co-organizers of the webinar today. And after that, you will get a lot of really practical insight from Mr. Ribeiro. Mr. Ribeiro is today in Portugal. Mr. Maleki is, I believe, in Tehran. And I am today in the Kingdom of Denmark. So without further ado, let me get started. Perhaps for those of you who don't know me, perhaps I should tell you just very quickly my story as it relates to the wonderful and beautiful country of Iran. The magazine cover that you see to the left was from my very first visit to your country, and I had a very good time. But since I've been upgraded, so to the right you see an interview that was done on this very beautiful and very relevant channel that you have called Kishaware, which I recommend that you check out. There's lots of really good content on Kishaware. So last time I had the opportunity to visit 3 cities in Iran, and I had a wonderful experience, and I got to understand the country a little better, but also in particular what the status of digital marketing is in Iran right now. And I think you are in a very, very interesting place in time when it comes to marketing, consumer behavior, and all of the opportunities that follows with that as well. So the first tip, if you can call this a tip that I have, is to always, whatever it is, to focus on the customer. And of course, in this day and age, the experience of the customer is incredibly important because customers are changing. They demand different things of brands. And as we relate this to the digital context, there's no doubt in my mind, having followed this for over 20 years, that many brands make a huge mistake of designing great customer experiences in the physical space, but not in the digital space. And if you look at well-known companies in Iran, I think perhaps you will agree with me that they offer great customer experience in the physical sense, but when you interact with them in the digital sense, you are wondering why the experience is not very good. But I think this will change over time. In a time where there's so much technology, there's so much confusion, there's so many things we can do, I also want to remind you that in reality, you can make your job simple. If you manage to focus on customers and truly understand how to find the most direct way to create an emotional connect with customers, your job will be easier, but more importantly, your job will be more successful. And since we're just highlighting stuff here, let me just again remind you that if you put your audience front and center, and if you make the effort to try to really know your customers, know what makes them tick, try to anticipate their needs, and by and large, make it easy for customers to do business with you. Make it easy for customers to come into what we call sort of a habitual behavior. What that means is that you get into people's mind box so that they don't consider to do business with your competition, but they have you in their mind when they are out to purchase a given product. And this is really important. Yet, what I find traveling the world, and I have for a long time, and speaking to clever, smart, very well educated marketers all over the world, it's like we very often forget that what it's really about to be successful in business is to focus on customers, not on technology, not on channels, and so on. Now, when we look at the customers, just very, very quickly here, there are a number of things that you're going to be experiencing more and more in the Iranian market as well. First is that we live in a transparent world. You are familiar with reviews, social media commentary. If you don't make your customers happy, they might start talking negatively about you and your brand online. At the same time, trust is incredibly important, and that goes especially for e-commerce. Whenever people transact in a monetary way online, trust is really, really crucial. And Troy will speak a little bit about some of these components, but just keep in mind, trust is something that exists on so many levels. It's trust the brand, trust the process, trust the product description, trust the price, trust the logistics, and so on. So for those of you who are in e-commerce, these are things you must take very, very seriously. Relevance and customer intimacy obviously is important, but what's also so interesting about the Iranian market is that you really are very much a multi-channel kind of environment. And that means that even for those of you who are purely e-commerce players, you probably also need to have a role in the traditional media space to reach your customers effectively. Immediacy, I'll speak a little bit about that towards the end of my presentation, but that's something we must take very, very seriously. And something I noticed in Iran, and I say this with humor, is that if something could be done tomorrow, why do it today? And that does not work with the new kind of consumer. If they post a message on Telegram or somewhere else to get in touch with you now, they expect an answer very quickly, not tomorrow. And that requires something of your business to organize yourself so that you will be able to respond very quickly to your customers. And I want to remind you as well that as much as we might think that people really want to spend time reading about our brand and checking our products and so on, the reality is, as you know, that more and more people are spending more and more time on their mobile devices, smartphones and tablets and whatnot. But of the time they spend on mobile devices in the North American market, for example, 46% of that time is me time. Me time. Me time is something we all of us do, even if we won't admit it. Me time essentially has a lot to do with entertainment, right? Entertaining ourselves on our mobile devices. But I'm mentioning this because I will encourage you to find out how your customers spend their time when they're on a desktop and when they're on a mobile, because it will help you understand how you can tap in to win some of their time. And I don't think I need to remind you that customization is no longer a trend. It is a fact. It's reality. And when you build your website, when you build your e-commerce portals, when you do your email marketing, you really want to try to figure out, how can I customize, or even better, personalize my messages? And I think for e-commerce, this is especially true. I should say to you all that you will, of course, get a link to the slides and other information that we use here today. Thank you very much, Mina Yahani, for asking that question. I forgot to mention that earlier. So what I'm saying here, I'm not going to show you how to do customization or personalization. I'm just going to remind you that this is actually very important, because if you start building a web presence now and don't take customization or personalization into account, what you're really doing is building a presence that would be perfect for 5 years ago, but is going to be obsolete a few years from now. And I happen to know that there are technology providers in Iran who do a very good job of providing services that allows you to do customization and personalization. But let's just step up to in the 10,000 feet view, and let me give you this information very quickly. Because what I've learned working with brands all across the world over a long period of time is this: if you approach digital from a tool perspective or from a channel perspective and purely from a marketing perspective, you might succeed. But your business needs to evolve as digital becomes a bigger and bigger part of everyone's life in Iran and other markets that you are active in. So does digital become a much bigger part of your business, not just for marketing, not just for customer service, but for the whole business. So what I encourage businesses to do is to run sort of a strategy or a transformation process where the company management set a destination for where they want to be in 3 years, 5 years time, for example. This slide from Bain and Company, I think, is good inspiration for how to do that, especially because it takes into account that this doesn't happen overnight. This is a long process. The more traditional your business is, the longer that process is going to be. So sort of tranching it up, or if you will, setting steps for how are you going to get to that digital destination that you eventually want to get to, I think is a good idea. And keep this in mind, just as a reminder. I know you know this because you're a smart person. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. But it's true that online retailing is, of course, growing and growing and growing. And this comes in part as a result of traditional retailers or unorganized retailers decreasing as online takes over. But keep in mind, this does not mean that pure play retailers are the only model. Obviously, what we're seeing with Amazon, for example, is it's really that multi-channel combination where very successful retailers, they have an online presence that is very strong, but they also have a strong offline, or if you will, brick and mortar presence as well. And in terms of how people spend time, you know this, in Iran as well, more and more people spend more and more time online. But television, that many people are so busy saying television doesn't work anymore from a marketing perspective, radio doesn't work anymore from a marketing perspective. Be careful with that. Be careful with such statements, because sometimes it's not true. Television is still very strong in most countries in terms of generating results, and so is radio, and so is print, and so is outdoor. And I think in Iran, this is also very true. So keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the Iranian statistics that you can get out. It's good to look at other countries, but obviously in the Iranian market, you want to understand what is going on today in your market and where is this going in the near future, so that you can understand where you need to be. And that's what I mean by the future is already there in Iran. It's just not very evenly distributed. And that's difficult. I'm in Denmark. That's not difficult because most people sort of behave the same way online. Our internet penetration is 97, 98%, and it's been at that level for a long time. But in Iran, it's different. Your internet penetration is impressively high, but people's behavior, might differ a lot between the main cities like Tehran and Mashhad and Isfahan and Shiraz and other cities that are smaller and where people's behavior may be slightly differently. So you want to take that into account when you do your planning as well. Here's some questions for you. I'm not going to run through all of these questions. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. And as we said before, you do have an opportunity to get the slides. The first thing, and it's the most important thing, importante, as they say in some country, which is how do you map the buying process of your audience? So you really want to understand how is it that an audience member comes to make purchase? What are the steps they go through? Where do they research? How do they check prices? How do they check quality? How do they check reviews? And once you know that, you want to align that with your selling process. And keep in mind that incubation time today, as a result of digital, is longer than it used to be. What that means to you is that most customers take longer to make a purchase decision today. And the reason is because they do a lot more research. So you want to take that into account as well. And Schwal will touch upon some areas later on. When I say Schwal, of course, I'm referring to Mr. Ribeiro. The other thing that you want to consider is ask yourself, for your market, for your audience, what are the main drivers for delivering a good to great customer experience online? In order to understand that, you got to go out and ask your audience, right? You want to ask your audience, so what do you expect to see on our e-commerce portal, on our website, in our blog, in our TV channel? What does it mean for you to get a good to great customer experience on a personal level, right? The other thing you want to think about a little bit is contextual content, because I mentioned that specifically because you have so many, excuse my French, you have so many idiots that claim to be marketing experts who are running around telling people that content is king. But the reality, those of us who actually know what we're doing, if I may say that, we know that content means nothing if it's not in context, right? And this plays in as well to customization and personalization that I talked about before. And needless to say, the last thing I want to highlight here is how do you establish an effective workflow? What I've learned is that it's actually very difficult to run digital marketing effectively, because think about this. Digital marketing consists of so many details, so many fragments that we have to manage. So one of the things that I always recommend is that you really look at your processes from, let's say, campaign or campaign activity initiation all the way through to measurement of the success of that activity. And of course, you want to incorporate processes for how do you create stuff, how do you approve stuff, how do you do A/B split testing or other types of testings? And this regardless of whether your purpose is to create just a simple content page, e-commerce product pages, or anything else like that. I hope that this is helpful as reminders to you of what's important to set out on a successful path. So let's look very quickly at your ecosystem. Now, first and foremost, I don't think you have any doubt that the online channel is key. And when I say online, I mean both mobility presence as well as online presence. There's no doubt about the fact that when people want to check you out, very often they will actually want to go check out your web presence or your mobile presence. That's one thing, part of your ecosystem. The second thing is, obviously, make sure you have a good direction. Make sure you know your purpose. Why is it that you want to create an ecosystem online? Outline your strategy, your tactics, execution, and measurement, but keep in mind, start with your purpose. Don't start with your tactics. A lot of companies make that mistake. I should also mention at this point that I see some great questions coming in the chat box. Please let me finish my presentation, and then while the next presenter is doing his job, I will find the questions and reply to them. Thirdly, make sure you understand your funnel. Make sure you understand how you get people in and then how you convert them closer and closer to making their first purchase or to make a repeat purchase. And in this respect, look at the right-hand side of this slide. Look what's happened in the Western world, if you will, over the past 5-7 years, is that marketing has now a much bigger job, because marketing essentially has to not just generate leads for sales, let's say in a B2B context, but they have to create qualified, ready to buy leads that are then passed over to sales. And that means marketers are challenged on one hand, but it's also for marketing a golden opportunity to show what marketing can really do in terms of adding value to the business. Because, as you know, when the leads you pass on to your sales department are qualified, what's going to happen? That's right. What's going to happen is that the sales guys are going to be much happier, because they're going to find that it's easier for them to get the sale. Now, in addition to that, I recommend that you map your processes out. Here's one for lead acquisition that I developed years ago, and you're very welcome to copy this. And let me just highlight a few things on this one. First of all, describe your ideal lead. You have to be able to put characteristics of the people you want to sell to, and that's going to help you in so many ways. The second thing I want to mention is to develop your attractors. And when I mention attractors, I guess I'm talking about inbound marketing, content marketing. But it's very important that you're aware that not all of your content and not all of your products are going to be equally interesting to a large audience. So you have to be tactical here, and once in a while develop some attractors that will get you in a position where you can engage with an audience. In fact, for Markedu, who's hosting this webinar is an attractor, right? Another attractor for Markedu, which is in the business-to-business space, is something like the State of Email Marketing report, for example, is another attractor that generates hundreds and hundreds of leads at a very, very little cost. So you really want to be sure that you have defined your attractors, and also realize that attractors take longer time and cost more money to develop. But in the end, usually, when you do it well, the cost per new customer or the cost per lead is going to be cheaper. Let me just answer one question from Sorab Shiniforoshan. Yes, for a market in a transition phase, digital marketing is still very, very relevant. But, and it's a great question, and thank you for asking it, but obviously it's important to balance the traditional mix with the new digital mix, and understand that just because digital is fantastic in so many ways, it doesn't mean it's the right way to reach all types of audiences. So it's a very good question, and the answer is yes with those comments. Now, if we look at your ecosystem, you have to ask yourself, what do I need in order to have the best possible presence that I can? And why do I need each of these elements? I think it's obvious to everyone why you need a website, but do you need a blog? You got to ask yourself that. If you need a blog, are you actually able to consistently produce content to serve up on that blog? The same goes for apps. Do you need an app? If you need an app, why? What's the purpose of that? The same with the other channels here, like e-commerce and offline. But this is really what an ecosystem is. Now, we could talk for days about ecosystem, but obviously we don't have time for that. But here's actually a methodology that you can get. If you complete the post-webinar survey, you will get this methodology with commentary on March 25th, 2017. So today or tomorrow, you will receive an email asking you to evaluate your experience at this webinar today. So I have to speed up a little bit here. So when you plan content and approach for your online presence, here's a model that you might be able to use. It's called FERDIC. It's very simple because it just asks a few questions. First of all, do you know what your audience are looking for and why? And if you do, then you know what to post or publish on that particular part of your ecosystem. Understand what they need to understand what they might relate to, understand what your audience would like to do, understand how they want to interact, which is why, how, and when would they like to interact with us, and understand what they want to complete in terms of, for example, transactions. Simple as that. If you ask these questions, I'm pretty sure that you get a good understanding of how you need to approach this, because that's not how most people do it. Most people, for example, when they develop the structure of a website, they sit down internally and then they talk about what they would like to talk about on a website. That's not necessarily the same as what a customer or potential customer would emphasize if they were asked what they expect to see on a website. I'm sure that makes sense. FERDIC is more of a Sorab Shiniforoshan. FERDIC is more of a methodology than a theory, and it was developed by me. And I didn't write a book about it. So I'm getting towards the end of my presentation here. So let me just give you a few highlights. First of all, marketing analytics is a truth teller. You have to use it. Your marketing analytics system is going to tell you a whole lot about what you did well in the past, what you should avoid in the future. And as you see from this global stat, it's quite surprising to see that only 1/3 of marketers are using marketing analytics on a regular basis. By using, I should say that they check their numbers and try to understand them, because most marketers obviously have some sort of marketing analytic in place. There's something going on with the slides here. The next thing is most wanted response, MWR. That's a way for you to focus, to make sure that you become successful with your online presence. Most wanted response really is about understanding what you want people to do, or what you want people to think, or what you want people to learn, or especially how you want people to react, and then obviously focusing on the next step. Let me give you an example of that in a moment. Before I give you the example, let me also say this, because I know a lot of marketers are struggling with this. Eyeballs, likes, and traffic are not proper measurements of success. The number of actions your audience take is. So if you look at the slide and the left-hand side, you will see there's a blog post. What matters about this blog post is to get people to click on one of those two links and then take an action. A lot of people are celebrating when they get 10,000 views on a page. That means nothing unless you get people to take action. Mr. Ribeiro is going to show you how you do that. So here's an example. Now pay attention. This is the top of a website, and you see the MWR signs there. So that means the most wanted response, number one, the most important response we want is to get people to sign up to the newsletter. Number two is to take a free email marketing audit. Number three, you see at the lower left corner, is to download some reports. Number four is to discover the Horizon workshop. And then you see there are a couple of trust elements that Mr. Ribeiro also will talk about in a moment, right? So this is what we want to accomplish on this particular website. Here's the result. I know this is a bit small, but I hope you can see it. So our most wanted response one was to get people to sign up for the newsletter, and 8.1% of all the visitors clicked there. Our second most wanted response was to get people to click on the free email marketing audit, but as you can see, only 2.9% did that, but 6.2% clicked on the link below the big button. You see that? You see how small this is? Or learn more about marketing services? And 6.2% clicked there. And that's quite interesting. And that's something I wouldn't have known if I wasn't tracking this using marketing analytics. And this is simple stuff. Everyone in the room today can do this tomorrow. It's not difficult. It's not expensive, right? So pay attention to those numbers. Here is another good example that you might want to do as well. If you're wondering how to position your menu, for example, there are ways for you to measure that. And I was surprised when I saw this the first time because I assumed that most people would click on speaking topics, which is the first choice. But the majority of people paid attention to and clicked on speaking next and the mind box. So there are tools that will help you do this as well. The same thing as a reminder, when you do online advertising, make sure you don't make the mistake most people do. What you want to do is like this. To the left, you see a banner. You see there's an orange color, there's a logo, there's my pretty face, so to speak. And you see the landing page to the right. Again, you see my pretty face. You see the logo. And what that means is that people immediately will know that they are in the right place, right? And that's the first thing people ask themselves when they come to a web page, when they come to a website, when they come to an e-commerce portal, when they come to a blog. The first thing everybody asks themselves is this: am I in the right place? Don't ever forget that. And finally, don't forget what I said earlier. You have to prepare for this real-time marketing and service. And this is a challenge for many of us because real-time actually means responding to people's commentary, criticism, positive strokes in social media and elsewhere within, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. And if you are in B2C, that may be a big challenge because of the number of engagements that you will have. So that's it for me. If you have questions that are not in the chat box, if you think I can help you in any way, and if it's something I can do in 15 minutes or less, my email is there, michael@michaelleander.me. If it takes longer than 15 minutes, I will charge you $1,000,000, but then you get several hours as well. So that's it for me, and I would like our next presenter. He will present in Farsi, and his name is Mr. Maleki, and he represents the I call them E-Act, but it is the Internet consortium in Iran. So, Mr. Maleki, are you there?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Nice speech. And is there anyone has my voice? صدا من دارین؟ اوکی. من خب چند کلمه صحبت کنم براتون در مورد صدای من انشالله که خوب بیاد. در مورد حالا اتفاقات بعدی که قرار انشالله بیفته. اول اینکه ممنون که به این وبینار اومدین. ما سعی کردیم بعد از همایش 21 مرداد که آقای لندر رو به ایران آوردیم باهاشون ارتباط بگیریم مجددا، به خاطر اینکه فیدبک هایی که داشتیم در واقع از صحبت های ایشون و چند شرکتی که ما به همراه ایشون برای مشاوره رفتیم نتایج خیلی خوبی حاصل شد و سعی کردیم خب از دانش ایشون بتونیم بیشتر استفاده بکنیم. یه سری برنامه ها داریم برای سال آینده، مثل مواردی که مثل 2 تا کتابیشون دارن. یک کتاب دارن مختص ایران می نویسن و اینها رو ما حتما به زبان فارسی منتشر خواهیم کرد انشالله. سعی می‌کنیم هر 3 ماه یک کتابشون رو در واقع منتشر بکنیم و تابستون سال آینده مجددا ایشون به ایران تشریف خواهند آورد. یک نمایش در تهران داریم مجدد اهواز و مشهد و در مستر کلاسی رو برگزار میکنیم به همراه در واقع آموزشگاه بنژیگار و بازار دانایی که در واقع بتونیم ازشون بیشتر استفاده کنیم. به هر حال من فکر میکنم که ایشون ایمیلشون رو راحت جواب میدن، ازشون مشورت بگیرید، باهاشون در ارتباط باشین، سوالی اگر دارین. ولی ایشون در واقع 3 سال گذشته سخنران برتر بین‌المللی شدن در حوزه به قولی مارکتینگ و به صورت خاص از تابستون امسال دارن رو بازار ایران مطالعه میکنن. در مورد با هم دیگه ارتباط داریم، اطلاعات رو با هم دیگه شیر میکنیم و بحث بازاریابی دیجیتال رو در ایران در واقع انشاءالله میخوایم به صورت خیلی تخصصی ببریم جلو. من دیگه وقتتون خیلی نمیگیرم، از صحبت‌های تخصصی این دوستان استفاده بکنید. اطلاعات در مورد کتاب‌هایشون و در واقع حالا همایش‌هایی و زمانی که به ایران خواهند آمد رو در واقع در کانال کنسرسیوم کسب و کار اینترنتی در تلگرام @EACTIR که حالا بعدا تایپ هم میکنم میتونید در واقع دسترسی بهش داشته باشید و اطلاعات جدید رو بگیرید. فکر میکنم که سخنران بعدی آقای جاوری بریو در واقع هستن که در مورد ایمیل مارکتینگ فکر میکنم میخوان صحبت بکنن که ایشون هم به شدت به صورت تخصصی و فوکوس دارن در حوزه ایمیل مارکتینگ. از صحبت‌هایشون استفاده کنید. اگر کسی در واقع صحبتی هم داره. اوکی. Thank you, Mr. Leander, for chancing me for a speech. And I would say welcome to Mr. Ribeiro for having a speech about topics. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Maleki. Wonderful. So yes, as you said, Mr. Maleki, I'm very pleased to pass on the microphone to João Ribeiro. He is someone I have worked with for many years, and clearly one of the most talented that I know in the space of digital marketing, but in particular anything to do with data-driven marketing, which would be email marketing, optimization of conversion flows, and so on. So without further ado, let me pass the microphone over to Mr. Ribeiro. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is João Ribeiro. I'm from Portugal, and I'll be speaking today about how you can get started with successful email marketing. So just a little bit, a brief summary about who I am. I'm a direct and digital marketeer. I have an extensive international hands-on experience, and I've worked with both B2B and B2C brands. I also passionate about search engine optimization and conversion rate optimization. Apart from that, I'm a trainer at Markedu, and I also a guest teacher at ISEG Lisbon University, where I teach email marketing in a post-graduation. So today we're going to speak about email marketing, and I'm going to present you some facts and numbers that contradict some of the things you might have heard about email. Fact number one, email today is still the channel that delivers the biggest return on investment for marketeers. This is a recent study conducted by VentureBeat, and as you can see, email outperforms TV, radio, social, video, display ads, paid search, and affiliate marketing. So this is something you should look into when you are thinking about which channels to use on digital marketing. Another one, and this is a very interesting one, is that email beats social by 40 times for customer acquisition. This means it's 40 times more efficient to use email to acquire new customers than it is to use social media. One thing that I would like to start explaining, and one thing that I think it's very important is when you think about email is what are you going to offer to your recipients? What is your email value proposition? And this is, you can split this in two parts, is one, what kind of content are you going to offer to your subscribers? And when you think about content, you should think about, are you going to offer newsletters? Are you going to offer exclusive discounts? Are you going to offer educational content? So when you're thinking about your email strategy, you should think about which content are you going to deliver? How are you going to make this channel to be exclusive? And how are you going to add value to your subscribers using email? And the second one is, how often should you email your subscribers? So should you send them 1 email per week? Should you send them 2 emails per week? 5 emails per week, and so on. So you need to find and you need to set expectations for your subscribers about the frequency of your emails. So I have an example here where you can see both things. This is a landing page where people can subscribe to a newsletter, and at the top you can see where we have the headline, and that's where we have also added some incentives to increase the conversion rates. So at the top we have the headline, and this headline explains to the visitors to this page where they are at, and in this case this is a landing page to receive Mr. Michael Leander's newsletter. And when they do that, they can also get 2 free marketing reports immediately. And below that, you can see the content concept for this newsletter. It's an honest newsletter. People will get real-life marketing case studies. You will also get the latest and the newest developments in marketing, survey results, and also, again, the 2 reports that were promised in the headline. Another thing you should add is the frequency. You can see below where you have the bullets of the content concept, you can see that the frequency can be tailor-made in this case, which means we're offering the subscribers the possibility to select how often they want to receive the newsletter. Again, add more incentives to increase the conversion rate. Incentives in this case were that for people who are a subscriber, they get a chance to win a surprise gift every month, as long as they remain a subscriber. And below, you reconfirm the permission, and you also reconfirm the incentive. And below that information, there was the actual form. So when you think about how to create pages to acquire subscribers to your email marketing activities, you should look into these elements and you should put them up so that your subscribers know what they should expect from your communications. A good lesson that I have to offer you is that you should never buy email lists. Email lists are usually lists where people are not really 100% sure to whom or to what they have subscribed to, and then these lists are sold to other brands. And usually what happens when you send emails to these lists is that they're not going to be responsive. So my advice to you is to build your own permission-based email list. I'm going to show you some examples on how permission-based lists perform against non-permission lists. You can see now in the slides that for a non-permission list, the lowest rates are 6.40% unique open rate against the permission list that has 20%. In terms of click-through rate, an average low permission number is 0.4, and the high permission is 7.2. When we look at the highest numbers, you can see that there is a 91% increase from a non-permission list to a permission list. In terms of click-through rate, there's a 1,165% increase when you compare the non-permission list against the permission list. In terms of opt-out rate, you have 0.6 against 0.05, which is minus 92%, which is in this case a good result. So because you're decreasing the number of people who opt out from your list. You might know this this man. It's not me, although it's bold as well. But this is Seth Godin. He is the father of permission marketing. He is the one who came up or the one who started speaking about permission marketing. And what he says is that selling to people who actually want to hear from you is more effective than interrupting strangers that don't. So whenever you think about acquisition, you should acquire permissions to speak to these people instead of acquiring lists and interrupt people that don't have a previous connection to you. So I'm going to explain you, and I'm going to give you some tips on how you can acquire more subscribers. And you can do this by, for example, hosting a dedicated subscription page on your website. And on this example, you have a subscription page, which is the number one. And the process is that people will fill in that form inside that page. Once they fill in the form, they are sent to a success page, and that success page will highlight what the next steps are. And after they subscribe, they will also get a welcome email. And on this case, for example, we have an incentive so that people go from this welcome email to the website and then use the discount to make a purchase. So you're converting someone from a visitor to your website to a subscription or a subscriber, and then from that step you want to convert those subscribers into customers. You can also use several locations on your website using technology that allows you to convert the visits and subscribers by adding, for example, top navigation bars that highlight the newsletter subscription. You can use widgets on your blog. You can also use inside articles on your website footer and the very known pop-up sign-up forms. Here are some examples. Some examples are short. By short, I mean they only request you to fill in your email address and your name, and that's it. Others require you to fill in more information. The more information you ask on these forms, the more you can later use to target and segment your campaigns. So speaking about segmentation and targeting, target your subscribers with the right message at the right time is something you need to do. Batch and blast is no longer something you should be doing, and one size does not fit all subscribers. So here's some interesting stats about segmentation and personalization. According to Aberdeen, personalization or personalized email messages improve the click-through rates by an average of 14% and the conversions by 10%. Experience says that 50% of the companies feel that they can increase interaction within the email by increasing personalization. And 74% of the marketeers say that target personalizations increases customer engagement. And this is the stats by eConsultancy. What this means is that in order to increase relevancy and the return on investment of your email campaigns, you need to move from a broad campaign, which is the old days way of sending emails, that is the same message to the same group. You need to move from that level to the level where you can start segmenting campaigns and send the right message to the right segment. And ultimately, you should want to aim to send the right message to the right person at the right time. And so to do that, you need to master first the segmented campaigns, and then you can move for a behavioral, more behavioral approach where you can actually send the right message in one-on-one communication. Also very important is that you test your emails. You want to test your emails to learn and to be able to optimize your email marketing activities. And I have a little test here. So I'm going to ask you all to participate in this test. And I'm asking you which email do you believe was the most clicked? Or in this case, which email had the most click-through rate? So I invited you all to use the chat box, and if you think email A was the one who got more clicks, just type A. If you think it was B, you type B, and you have the last one, which is C. So we have 1B, 1C, another B, B. So seems like B is winning. We have C, C, B, C. We have a tie here, so we need more people to vote. B and B and C. Mr. Maleki says A, so we have our first A, and we have one more for B. Okay, so I'm going to share the results now. Most of you said B and C, although B was the one with most votings. So let's see the results. B was the worst performing email of all, and A was the top performing email. So congratulations, Mr. Maleki. You were the only one who said A, and no, Zaha also said A. So we have two people that guessed it right. So that's very good. So I know that some of you said that you cannot read what's in these emails, but the purpose of this test was to understand which layout, which email layout performed best in terms of clickings. And the one who performed best in terms of clickings was email A. Okay, so what else can you test, and which kind of test can you conduct in email marketing? You can test your sender name. It's very important that in terms of branding, that your sender name is recognizable, and also that people instantly see your sender name and they can identify it. So that's the first step. What they do when they log into the inbox. It's to see who has sent the email. So it's very important that you have an optimized sender name. So you can test your sender name, your sender email address, and of course you can also test your subject line. In terms of content, you can test your wireframe and your layout. You can test the copy. You can test the call to actions. You can test personalization, and personalization is in this context is only using data merge, and data merge is the capability you have to use the data you have on your database, and based on that you can add, for example, hello Mr. and then first name, or you can use other merge tags. You can also test the design in terms of fonts, colors, and images. Another important test is to test the send, the time of the send, what time we will be sending the emails, which one performs best, and also the days where you send your communications. I have another test that was conducted. In this case, the test was on the left side. On the A version, you had the call to action was watch the webinar, and on the right side, the B email was view presentations and slides. And B version had an increase on clicks of 49.6%. Just changing the wording on the call to action button gave an increase of 49%. So this is something you should look into it, because very often so small changes can produce big variations in clicks. And now, last but not least, how can you optimize the conversions on your landing pages in e-commerce sites? For those who do not know who a landing page is, a landing page should be a page where people land either coming from an email campaign, or coming from a search result, or coming from a display ad. And these landing pages should only have one call to action, one single action that should require from a subscriber, or in this case, from a visitor. But how do you measure the conversion rate? I have an example here from a webinar that was for the Portuguese audience of Markedu. And on a given week, we had 93 people to visit our landing page. From those 93 people who visit the landing page, 33 of these visitors completed the form, which was our most wanted response, or in this case, the action we wanted the visitors to complete. This means we have a conversion rate of 35.48%. I added the conversion rate formula below, so you see that the conversion rate is the number of visitors completing your goal action divided by the number of visitors, and then you get the conversion rate. And then based on this number, you can speculate and create hypotheses on which elements to test to increase this number. Which this means is you want to have the same number of visitors, but you want to convert more visitors. This is an example on how we do it at Markedu. We use Google Analytics, and this is reporting inside Google Analytics, and this is where we're getting the actual conversion rate. So as you can see on the left side, you have the 93 visitors to the registration page. It also tells you where they came from. On the right side, you have the 60 people who did not complete the action, and it also tells you where they're going to. And at the bottom, you see the 33 people who have completed the goal. But what is A/B testing and how does A/B testing work? So A/B testing is a method to compare two versions of a web page against each other to determine which one performs best. So the way you determine the performance is based on the KPI, the conversion. So you use the methodology that I've shown you before, and then based on that, you will understand which page is converting best. This is how it's conducted. So you have all your visitors. You need a proper software to do this. There are many softwares that allow you to conduct this A/B split testing. We will share some of them in the materials that we'll send to those who fill in the survey. So we have visitors. The platform will split the version A and version B of our pages through the traffic that we're injecting. So in this case, 50% of the traffic will see the version A and 50% will see the version B. Then based on the conversion, which is how many people completed your action, you will determine a winner. And that winner will be the page that we keep for our existing marketing activity. This is a testing framework that you can use. So you look into your analytics and you determine which pages you want to increase the conversion. Usually you will look into pages that have a lot of visitors, but they are not converting. And then you look at the pages that you have identified in this previous step, and you have to create an hypothesis, and you have to identify which variables inside that hypothesis that you want to test, and then you create variations of those variables to be able to test. You run the experiment and then you measure the results. And then this is like a loop. You are always trying to improve more and more your conversion rate optimization. Here are some landing page basic elements that you should always have at your landing page. So you should always have the value proposition at the top. You can use the value proposition throughout your landing page elements, but each should be stated in your headline. Then you have your hero shot. You have your call to action form, or you can have a call to action without a form. You have the bullets below your hero shot. And you also have what we call the trust signals, which in this case can be a testimonial. At the right side, you have where we highlight the benefits and where we highlight the features from which given product or service that you're selling through these landing pages. Here in more detail, so at the top you have the headline, you have the supporting headline. Below you have the hero shot. You have one testimonial. You have, again, bullets that describe your service or your offering, and then on the right side the call to action form, and below you have another trust element, and then you highlight the benefits and the features. So the benefits, the difference between the benefits and the features is that the benefits should highlight what is the adding value from this product or service, and the features is just the characteristics of that product or service. I'm going to give you some conversion-centered design tips, and the first one is when you look at this landing page that we were looking at here, you can see that, for example, where we have the call to action, you can have it with what we call encapsulation or non-encapsulation. If you want to encapsulate your form, you have to kind of make it stand out from the rest of your page, like you're seeing on this example. This next example also does a good job of highlighting the form. And on this one, for example, there's no encapsulation, so you cannot really have the form standing out from the rest of the page. Another conversion-centered design tip is that you should use color contrast to highlight the actions you want. For example, on this page, the call to action does not have any contrast. All this page looks very reddish or orange. But look now, if we added contrast, the button now stands out from the page because it's contrasting against the other colors that we use on the page. So in many markets and countries, there's always this debate about which color of the button is the best color. My best advice for you is that you should not focus on the color itself, but you should focus on the contrast. Which contrast color is best to stand out from the rest of your landing page colors? So look, this was the original one where the button was similar to the colors used, and this one is using the conversion-centered design tip about contrast. So it stands much more, so the likeliness of being clicked is much higher. Again, here they did a very good job of highlighting and showing contrast in the button, so you can clearly see the download guide button there. Another tip is the directional cues. So what are the directional cues? Here's a very good example where the cue is driving your attention towards the formularium that you have on the right, and that's exactly what we want. We want people to come to this page and to fill in the form. So this does a very good job in guiding you with visual cues to the actual form. Another example here, more subtle example, where you can see here there's another cue as well. And the last tip I have to offer you is the power of vision. And whenever you see this example on the left side, this was a heat map example where people wear a special device, and with that device we know where people are looking at. So on the left side you have people looking at the baby's face and not so much on the focusing on the headline and the text. But when you add an image that where the baby face is looking at the actual headline, then you have the power of suggestion, and the high site is very powerful in this case. So you see that in the test that was performed on the right side, people are looking at the baby face, but at the same time they are looking at the headline and they're looking at your copy, which is very important that people look into the content, and then based on that content they take an action. And with this I end my presentation. I want to thank you all for the time you take for this presentation, and I'm going to pass on the microphone to Mr. Michael Leander.
And thank you so much, Mr. Ribeiro. I thought that was very interesting, and I hope that you listening thought interesting to listen to Mr. Ribeiro's practical tips. I'm sure that you might think that this was a lot to take in, but keep in mind that the most important thing in terms of becoming successful with any type of marketing really is to find your starting point and to be focused on what you want to achieve. Try to limit your options in the beginning. I think the mistake that many make is that they want to do everything at once, and the result of that often is that they don't do anything very well. So we will spend about 5 minutes to take questions, and while you are writing your questions or rewriting your questions, let me just say about conversion. This is the first time I have been part of a webinar where the majority, if not everyone who signed up, were from Iran. And I just checked the numbers, and we had 170 people. Let me give you the stats here. 170 people registered, but only 42 people showed up. And this is interesting for us because it tells us something about commitment. Now, it also tells us something about language, that the language sometimes is a barrier and sometimes creates confusion. So people might not know if it's on one time or the other, or they might not know how they register. I can tell you our global stats for show up for all webinars that Markedu has done over the years is 50%. And there are some markets where they're 70% all the time, and there are some markets where they're 25 to 30%. This is very, very interesting. But I think the language really is the problem here. So for those of you who came late, I think we will do something that we normally don't do, which is we are going to make the recording available for free. So do you have any questions for Mr. Ribeiro or for Mr. Maleki or for me? Then we have a few minutes to take those questions. Oh, that's interesting. Surab Shini Foroshan. Would you send me an email concerning that, Surab Shini Foroshan? So, Mr. Ribeiro, Mr. Fadai says he knows Adobe Target A/B testing, 5-second test unbounce as tools for A/B split testing. Do you have others that you can recommend?
Yes, I do have, and I'm going to post some of these tools here. One of them is Optimizely. You might I also know the brands that you have there. I'm going to add one more.
Okay, while you're doing that, Mr. Ribeiro, thank you, Nibras, for your comment about people participating using a single device. Does that mean, Nibras, that you think webinar in Iran is better outside working hours? It would be interesting for us to know for future reference. And I think Mr. Fahang Sadeki, I'm sorry, sometimes I can't tell if it's a female or male, but I hope it's Mr. Fahang Sadeki. Yes, EACT and their partners will be organizing conferences in August where I will be there in Tehran and Mashhad and Arash, I think, what the last city. So very much looking forward to come back to your beautiful, beautiful and wonderful country. Let's see, there are other questions here. I think, Mr. Ribeiro, perhaps you'd like to say something about this. How does content affect on conversion rate? This is a question from Mr. Ahmad.
How does content affect on conversion rate? Well, let me see. What kind of content are you trying to say? It's the landing page content and how the content is described. Is that what you mean?
I think what Mr. Ahmad might be thinking about is it could be a number of things. One could be the amount of content on, let's say, a landing page, Mr. Ahmad. The other could be probably thinking about content in context. Sentences you use in landing pages, what Mr. Ahmad is saying, Mr. Ribeiro.
Okay, so it's actually very important. And the previous question was about the platforms. And A/B testing is not so much about which platform you use, but more about which elements on the page you want to test, right? Because the tools, they're going to be more or less similar. What you do with the tools is what it matters. So it's important that you test, for example, how you describe your products or services. You can test different headlines. You can test the different call to actions. And those elements, it's the most important elements that you can test. And those elements are the ones who are going to help you understand how you can improve your conversion. Not always by using A/B split, you can uplift your results. Sometimes some of the tests you will conduct will give you worse results, but that you have to use those results as learnings, and you have to understand which kind of content and how you describe the content and how will that content resonate with your audience. And the testing is all about learning how your audience reacts to your content and how you can improve that, the way you display that content to improve conversions. I hope that that answers your question.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ribeiro. And don't forget that there's always a lot of discussion about short and long content. And what really matters most of the time is if it's the very last step in the purchase process, usually long content works better because people want to have a lot of things answered. So they're looking for answers to a lot of questions they may have. And if your long copy provides that, usually that converts better. There's another question from, let me just see if I can find it again here. It's a very interesting question. Where did it go? Where did it go? So what is the portion or proportion of sales of email marketing compared to total sales of corporation or SME? And Mr. Ribeiro, I'll just answer that real quick. Thank you, Sorab Shinifaroshan, for asking that question. Now, here's something really interesting. I've been lucky enough to work with, or I should say consult very large corporations as well as medium-sized corporations over the years. And I've implemented permission-based marketing in many of these. And what's really interesting is as markets mature, the proportion of digital goes up. And for many, still till this day, let's say the most popular channel to generate direct sales is still email marketing. But what the percentage is definitely depends. So we're working with a large e-commerce retailer, and in their case, it's like 90% of their revenue comes from email marketing. Back in the day, I worked with a big airline where they started with 10% of the revenue was from email, all the way up to 50% of their revenue came from their email marketing activity. So it really depends on what you're selling, which market you're in, and obviously, as Mr. Ribeiro said, if you do good email marketing or bad email marketing, right? And I hope that answers your question. There was something about culture having impact, and that goes without saying. In this webinar today, Mr. Ribeiro and myself, of course, we're a little bit handicapped because we don't have a lot of insight and experience actually doing marketing in Iran. So always take what us foreigners say with a grain of salt and try to relate whatever tips and advice was given to how things are in your country. Uh, okay, Sorab Shiniforoshan says that you work with Samsung Tehran, a branch in consumer goods, and 100% through a traditional channel. But of course, that makes sense for a retailer in Iran right now. But I think you will find we have very good insight about Samsung globally, and I think you will find that that will shift. You will see all of the large consumer brands now offer, probably in Iran as well, offer consumers to buy directly on Samsung's website, on Apple's website, on HTC's website, and so on. This is definitely a trend. But of course, many brands are careful because they don't want to make their retailers angry with them from, so to speak, stealing sales away from them. So it's a bit of a challenge. Are there any other questions that we've forgotten to reply to? I'm trying to. Okay, Mr. Ribeiro, there's one other question from Surab Shinofroshan, which is called the person is saying one major factor in consumer behavior is cultural behaviors. How would you apply A/B split testing in Iran for layout attraction?
That's a difficult question because, like Michael was mentioning, I don't have many insights about how you read pages in Iran. For example, for European countries, we have what we call the F way of reading it. So the way you read it is from right to left, and then bottom, and then right to left, and then again bottom. So I don't think that applies to Iran. And the other model, which is the Z version, it goes from left to right, and then on the diagonal again to the left, and then again to the right. And I don't think that I can say that these models will work in Iran, even if they are applied on a mirror. So yes, it's important that you take in consideration the cultural behaviors and how people expect that the information is somehow distributed through the layout. And it's important that that information it's not in the confusing way, so that people can read it and they're all in the right order, so that it makes sense when you read the landing page or the product page on your website, that everything is adding value to itself, all the elements, and then they lead you to the call to action.
Very, very good. Thank you. I think this is it. Now, I believe that you have received our email addresses, Mr. Ribeiro's and my own. And if you do have questions now or later, you're very welcome to send these questions. Just keep in mind, please, that we can spend up to 15 minutes answering one question. But after that, unfortunately, it's not possible without payment, because that's what we do. We sell our time. Thank you very much for attending here today. I do recommend that you check out EACT's website. That is the organization of Mr. Maleki's, where he is the head of that organization. And also keep an eye out for the conferences coming up in 3 cities in Iran in August. And if you have any special needs, have a talk with Mr. Maleki or one of his team, because they do a lot of good to further e-commerce as well as digital marketing in general in Iran, and they have a very fantastic, very smart setup where they contribute to the overall understanding and, if you will, penetration of digital and e-commerce in Iran. So I would very strongly encourage you to check out what they're doing. With that, I want to say thank you very much, Mr. Maleki, for the collaboration. Thank you for the wonderful conference in Tehran that we had, and for this webinar. Thank you also, Mr. DeBido, for taking time out of your busy schedule to share some of your insight. And thank you, List, for listening. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you one day soon in person. And look out for the survey that you will receive today or tomorrow. So with that, we're going to close the webinar. And I wish you a great day today and all the other days. Thank you very much.